Welcome back. If you like Butterfinger, you are going to love today's cake. It is a chocolate peanut butter Butterfinger cake. This cake is so delicious because it's made with super tender chocolate cake layers that have such a great contrast with the delicious crunchy texture of the Butterfinger filling. The first step of this recipe is to make those chocolate cake layers because we want to give them time to bake and cool. To make the chocolate cake batter, we are combining our dry ingredients, which include our all-purpose flour, granulated sugar, baking powder, baking soda, and salts. Once those are whisked together, we're setting them aside and then working on our wet ingredients. This includes our warm water, buttermilk, and cocoa powder. We're whisking this together to get out any clumps of cocoa that might exist, and then we're adding in our remaining wet ingredients. This includes our large eggs, vegetable or canola oil, melted butter, and vanilla extract. We're giving this a quick whisk just until all those ingredients are combined, and then we are pouring that into our dry ingredients. Now, I love this recipe because it can be made solely by hand. You can use a stand mixer if you want, or a hand mixer, but really all you need is a whisk. We're whisking together our ingredients until our batter is nice and silky smooth, and then we're pouring it into 3 prepared 8-inch pans. I like to line my pans with parchment paper and then spray them with a little bit of nonstick spray. And then once they are full of our delicious chocolate cake batter, we are popping them into a 350-degree preheated oven for 22 to 25 minutes. While our cake layers bake and cool, we are making our buttercream filling. Now, I love the filling because it's gonna serve 2 purposes. It's gonna have a peanut butter flavor for the inside of the cake, and then we're gonna mix in some melted chocolate to make the delicious chocolate buttercream for the outside of the cake. To make it, we are adding our unsalted butter into the bowl of our stand mixer and mixing on a medium speed until it is nice and smooth. You can also make this frosting in a bowl with a hand mixer if you don't have a stand mixer. Next, we add in our vanilla extract, salt, and our creamy peanut butter. Now, you can use chunky peanut butter, but I think it makes the frosting a little bit harder to mix, so just keep that in mind if you go that route. Once all those ingredients are mixed together, we're slowly adding in our powdered sugar. Now, you want to make sure you do this in a few different installments just so that you don't get any huge powdered sugar clouds exploding out of your mixer. You also can cover your mixer with a kitchen towel to kind of help keep that powdered sugar contained. Halfway through, I like to add in my heavy cream just to make the frosting a little bit easier to mix. And after we've added in the rest of our powdered sugar, we're going to scrape the sides of the bowl just to make sure that everything is getting properly incorporated. At this step, we're going to scoop out about 2 cups of frosting and place it in a separate bowl. And to that peanut butter frosting, we're going to fold in 1 cup of chopped up Butterfingers, and this is going to give it such an amazing texture. We're then going to cover that with some plastic wrap and set it aside. To our remaining frosting, we are going to mix in our melted and cooled milk chocolate, and we're going to mix until that is nice and smooth. Once both of our frostings are ready to go, we're going to just cover them with a bit of plastic wrap because this is an American buttercream and it can crust as it sits. So by placing some plastic wrap flush against it, it's going to keep it nice and fresh and ready to go. Once our cake layers have fully cooled to room temperature, we're going to level them with a serrated knife. This is also optional, but it makes your cake layers so much easier to stack and frost, so I really don't recommend skipping this step. And then it's time for my favorite part, assembling the cake. We are building this cake on a 10-inch grease-proof cake board. It's really important that whatever surface you're using is grease-proof so that your buttercream doesn't kind of stain it. A flat plate would also work great. We're going to add a small dab of frosting to the center of our cake board just to help keep that first cake layer in place and kind of act like glue. On top of this first cake layer, we are going to scoop half of that peanut butter Butterfinger filling. We're going to spread it out in a nice even layer with a large offset spatula, and then we're going to repeat that same process with our next cake layer. For our top cake layer, I always like to flip it upside down. It just makes it a lot easier to get nice sharp edges as we're frosting. And then we'll use some of our chocolate buttercream to crumb coat the cake. Now, a crumb coat is just a really thin layer of frosting that's going to help keep all that delicious filling in, along with any crumbs so that our next layer of frosting turns out perfectly. We're smoothing our crumb coat with our bench scraper and then cleaning up the edges with a small offset spatula. Now, our crumb coat doesn't have to be perfect, but the smoother that you get it, the easier time you'll have smoothing out your second coat of frosting, and it's also great practice for getting used to those motions. Once we're happy with our crumb coat, we're popping it into the freezer for about 5 to 10 minutes until the frosting is firm to the touch. Then we are adding on our second layer of chocolate buttercream and going through the same steps of smoothing with our bench scraper and large offset spatula, and then cleaning up those top edges. Now, for this next step, I highly recommend placing your cake on a rimmed baking sheet or a large baking sheet, because we're going to be pressing our crushed bits of Butterfinger into the side of the cake. And as you do this, a lot of it's going to fall out, and it's so much easier to clean up if you have a tray underneath your cake. So as we're doing this, we're just gently pressing those bits into the side of the cake, and you want to have enough pressure where they'll stick, but not be pressing too forcefully that you're going to be denting your frosting. Then we place our remaining chocolate buttercream in a piping bag fit with an open star tip. I'm using an Ateco 829 here, which is kind of a fun, crazy frosting tip, but really any open star tip will work. We're piping some swirls on top of the cake, and then I decided just to sprinkle a little bit of crushed Butterfinger on top of that for good measure, because you clearly can never have too much Butterfinger. And just like that, our Butterfinger cake is complete. Now it's time to cut in and enjoy. Always remember when you're cutting into a layer cake like this to use a sharp knife, and it also helps to run your blade under hot water or dip it in a cup with hot water and dry it off to get really nice clean cuts. If you want to make this Butterfinger cake at home, the recipe is included in the video description below, or you can Google Chelsweets Butterfinger Cake. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and until next time, happy baking!